Hi, Seaburns here. Instead of my usual cohort, Josh Derby, I have brought on the illustrious, ignominious, well-known, I think we shall say. He's a great guy, Charles Turner. We're here to talk about what brought him to HEMA, kind of where he's at, what he wants to do, and how he trains and how he wants to see the sport move forward. So yeah, Charles, let's start with softball here. Where are you based out of?
We're in East Texas historical fencing out of Tyler, Texas, right on Interstate 20, coming out of Dallas, heading towards Shreveport in Louisiana. And we're kind of alone out here. It's 2 hours one direction to Dallas and 3.5 to Houston. So anybody who wants to do HEMA within the area, we're the only option for them. So we have a little bit of a monopoly on the rural part of East Texas.
That's monopolies make running a HEMA club easy because there's nowhere for people to go. When I was still in Delaware, I used to run a club in Milford, and it was the only club in the state, so it made getting students
Made it easy.
very
I mean, where else are they going to go?
Exactly. So yeah, I guess to start, when'd you start and what brought you to it?
So I started, my first class was in 2015. I had just graduated high school. I graduated in 2014, and I was in college, and there was a foil, like a college like club foil thing going on, and it wasn't like Olympic foil, it was classical foil. And I remember looking at that and I was like, hey, this is cool. And I was talking to the head guy about it, and he goes, I don't think this is for you, but there's this thing called HEMA that's starting to get kind of popular, and there's actually a club here in town. I'll put you in contact with Michael Sims. And so they put me in contact with a guy named Michael Sims. I got his email, and that was the beginning. And I showed up to my first class just like everybody else in a park. We were in a local park. Everybody's HEMA club starts in a park. You're not a real HEMA club if you don't start in a park.
Nope.
You don't count if you get to start in a building. That's not fair. You don't know what it's like. Anyway, we started in a park, and then worked our way up from one sketchy indoor location to the next, and now here we are 10 years later with our first permanent location that we don't own, but we rent, and we control the time that we're there, and we have a key to the door and the AC and all the amenities that you would hope to have as a martial arts school, I think.
As someone who's still stuck in the swords in a park phase of doing HEMA, that is a huge milestone for a club, and good on you.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and I'm really happy about it. Now that we've hit this milestone, I've got a lot of like peers and stuff who've been fencing as long as I have, or pretty close, and they're beginning to start their own schools now. And it's nice for me to have that, that 10 years of look, it took us 10 years to get to a permanent location that we owned. So like, don't freak out about that whole thing. Like it's going to take a long time, man, to be able to build up both the revenue, if you charge dues at all, and then being able to save up your own money. Because to be honest with you, my co-instructor and I have run this school at quite a loss over the years, and it's because we love it. It's not because we have no desire to make money at this at all. His goal was to have a free hobby, and mine was just to do fencing. I don't care if it costs me a ton of money or not. It's just I love to do it, so I'm happy to pay for it.
That's kind of where I'm at too. It's hell, I run like little local tournaments, and that's all out of pocket because it grows the community and gets my students competitions without having to drive 8+ hours.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So yeah, no, that's really awesome that you guys got inside. So yeah, day one, 18-year-old Charles wanders in jeans and a t-shirt to his HEMA club with a desire to hit people with a sword, yeah?
Yeah, basically. I think I was wearing sweatpants. I think I had to wear sweatpants. I have some fascinating photos of that first day too. They're pretty rough. I keep them as a reminder.
Yep,
it's pretty terrible to look at, but it is what it is, It's everybody had to start somewhere.
Everyone has footage of their first spar, and it's always like the box of shame.
Honestly, I'm most thankful for my instructor, because 18-year-old Charles was a piece of crap. It was a real piece of work, and he was very patient and put up with a lot of bull crap from me. And I'm not gonna say that I'm not like a jerk anymore by any means, but I'm certainly more self-aware of how I was when I was 18. And now that I'm 29, I'm gonna be 30 in November. I'm very fortunate that he chose to look past those things and continue to just be a decent instructor instead of just telling me to get lost. Like I don't know if I would have been as good of a man as he was.
That's very fair. It's always a bit of an uphill battle, especially when you get some young gun who's hot to trot but a bit of a jackass. It's always just kind of fun seeing how people change, especially when you've been doing this for almost a decade now. Over a decade now
Yeah,
that I think
yeah.
about it. Yeah. So I guess that brings us to the next part of this. Between then and now, like, what's some of the big changes you've seen in the sport? What's some stuff you've noticed that's different from how it was then and now?
I've seen the competition metas change, like what was and was not cool. I remember watching Swordfish and listening to the commentating, and they were like foaming at the mouth over somebody doing a crumpal. Like that's all it took. They're like, wow, that person did a crumpal, and they were like, oh my god, a crumpal, a real one in sparring in a tournament. What does this mean? And nowadays it's like that's nothing. That's people don't get, like, back then they were just fascinated to see someone pull off not just just a technique, but like a historical technique, and in the way that it was written, and at the current interpretation or whatever. But now competition's a lot harder than it used to be. The region I'm in is kind of horrible to compete in, not because everybody's terrible, but because everybody's really good, and it's just every competition's a slog to get through. Pools feel like elims feel like harder elims, and finals just feels like a boss fight the whole time. It's rough down here, man. I can't say enough about the central region. The central region's it's all killers.
I've been out there
But
before. He's not kidding. It is brutal. Like when Rob Childs barely makes top 8, it's a rough region.
yeah, he was struggling. He struggled at tournament defense, and I know he still won Sword Strong, not this year, but the previous year, I believe, both Rapier and Saber. But yeah, it was it was a fight. It was a fight the whole time. It wasn't a lot of times, especially the guys on the top kind of have a cakewalk until you hit about second or third round of elims. You get into semis, and then you start fighting peers. But here it feels like you're fighting peers the whole time. It feels like even if it's not an A tier tournament, it still feels like I'm sorted into my category the whole time, no matter what I'm doing.
That's honestly the best feeling you can have, though, because those are the kind of fights that really help you grow as a fencer, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously the game has gotten better, and people have gotten better at swordplay as time has gone on. Hell,
Definitely, yeah.
I've laughed about this with my friends, but everyone remembers when Ivan Novichenko doing the knee slide Gazelin and longsword was like mind-blowing meta shit, and everyone tried to do it.
Oh
for
yeah.
a month.
Well, I remember Anton Kudovic doing that. I think it wasn't it was either Black Horns or Tyrnhau, where he did, it was a flesh into a Twer, into a Zwerhau, and it's a pretty simple move. You've thrust in opposition right up the middle, right into that right shoulder. Everybody's sword armed, or right person's sword arm, and then they over parry, and then you Twer to the head. Easy, right? And he did that, and everyone's like, oh my god, what an amazing movement. And nowadays, that's just, everybody does that. Everybody can do that. Everybody can parry that. Nobody gets hit. I don't say nobody gets hit by it, but it's not a big deal to see that anymore, because now everybody does it. It's just, things have changed. But I think a more obvious and visual change for everybody to see, not just people involved in the tournament scene, is the availability of gear, and all gear.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because when I started, it was where do you get gloves? It's like, well, we have Spez Heavies, and Absolute Force makes something that looks like a heavy glove, but you shouldn't buy it. Sparring glove exists, but you have to get them through HEMA supplies, and HEMA supplies markup's really high, and sparring glove won't sell to us directly. So I remember my first ever pair of longsword gloves were a pair of sparring glove mittens. No, they were sparring glove hooves with the split down the middle, and they had white stitching and white laces, and they matched my ultra cringe House Aaron from Game of Thrones sigil mask, and my Naaman fencing regular jacket, and I had a pair of Lynx. Oh yeah, I had a pair of Lynx fencing pants, which now is known as Superior fencing.
Yes.
So I think it was. So it's always. I think at the time. So there was back when it was South Coast Swords instead of SoCal Swords. South Coast Swords was selling Lynx, and then HEMA Supplies began selling Scholar, but it was the same company. It's still Superior fencing. Which, newsflash for anybody watching, if it's not Spez, or some other European company, it's superior fencing. Purple Heart, South Coast Swords, all of it. It's all superior fencing.
Yes.
Don't be like, hey, who should I buy from? They're all the same. Just don't fool yourself. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your time. Anyway, but this was back when it was called Lynx, and this was back to get this. You had to like. This was during the height of GWAT, so this is right during the global war on terror. The Kunar province is popping off right there at the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So Pakistan is considered a high-risk country. And if you send money to Pakistan, then you get eyeballs on you. So if you would PayPal somebody in Pakistan more than $200 at a time, it would get held in transit indefinitely by either the U.S. Treasury or Customs. And so the solution was you would talk to Superior Fencing like, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go to a Western Union in person with cash, and you're going to send $200 to these 3 separate people in 3 separate, areas of the country. And you're just thinking like, man, is this a scam, or am I funding ISIS, or like, what is this? And it ended up being legit, and we got gear, and it sucked. It sucked real bad.
Oh my gosh,
but it was something.
Gear.
That was the early HEMA gear. It was $250, and it came with a jacket and an overlay and pants and a jock strap, and it came with a bag, and it came with shin guards, elbow guards, wrist guards, and leather gloves. Not longsword gloves. It came with everything in a gorget. It was everything except your hard gloves.
Honestly,
and a
not
mask.
a bad deal.
Not a bad deal, yeah. But the jacket felt like that scene from the Christmas Story where that kid's got like 9 jackets on. He's like, oh, I can't put my arms down. That's what you felt like the whole time.
Oh my gosh, I remember the old days. Like, my Gen 1 AP is still floating around the Philly HEMA scene, and that thing is also pretty heinous.
Well, it's back before they started putting that like wicking fiber on the inside, because Spez, all of the new Spez jackets have that like mesh on the inside, and this is back when they were like, we're making these aren't fencing jackets, these are gambesons. We're making gambesons. We're making armor. And it was like, oh man, do we really need like 15 layers of linen or fake linen stacked on top of each other? Like, man, I live in Texas. It's under 15 degrees outside. I'm not trying to melt. And so the irony is here we are in a park. Me and Michael and Will, we all have gear. We all have full gear, but we ain't going to put it on. It's 100 degrees outside. So what was the point? So there was like on a personal note, when I started, I went to a tournament way earlier than I needed to. I was like 4 months in, and I went to my first tournament, and I did terribly. I did horribly. In fact, I don't know if people in the region know who these people are, but in my first ever tournament longsword pool, I had a guy named Charlie Yang, who was a killer from Houston. I had Jeremy Pace, who is, I think, currently number 9 in the world still at longsword, and I had Anthony Buonimo, who I believe is also a top 100 longsword fencer. That was my first ever longsword pool, and I didn't know who these guys were. I was new. I was 3 months in, and I just got smoked. I got smoked by all these guys, just beat up. But I was like, this is so cool. We're fighting for real. And I go back to my club, and they're like, oh, we're not going to spar. Like, none of us are good enough that if we start sparring now, then we're going to pick up some bad habits, and it's going to be hard to break, and we don't have any facilitating. And I remember being so turned off by that. I was like, I hate this. Like, these old dudes don't know anything. I remember I'm 18 years old. I was like, these old guys don't know anything. And I ended up going through like a divorce, and I had a night job, and so I kind of had to take a break from HEMA for a couple of years there. And I come back into it, and Will has moved away, and now Michael's running the school by himself. And Michael's, good enough now that we've got new people sparring day one with foam swords. And I look back and think, God, I was. Too. Yeah, because with the foam swords and stuff, I know some people are super against it because it's not like a real sword, but to me, it's not about that. It's about getting something in their hands, letting them do something on their first day, trying to get that spark ignited, right?
It's such a good advertisement too, because it's like, this is safe. Yeah. You can hit someone with it, and like, especially if, like, my first day, I remember I was handed a wooden waster, and my coach said, go hit that person. I'm like, but I'm gonna hurt him. And with foam, you don't have that fear, and you can kind of build someone up to steal without them worrying about getting hit hard or whatever.
Yeah, so remember, I'm in Texas, so I'm in like the heart of Arma. Where wooden wasters were all the things. Remember, Purple Heart Armory's domain name is called woodenswords.com. Christian and John Clements used to be like best bros. I think Christian was I think John was the best man at Christian's wedding, or the other way around. I might be completely
Wow.
making that up, but you know, things happened. Arma's in disfavor. John Clements is not considered a positive member of the community anymore. And I look back and realize how thankful I was that my instructors Will and Michael weren't about that wooden waster life.
Yep.
Because those things are dangerous. Those things are so dangerous.
Those are
No
more
flex on
dangerous
the
than
blade.
steel.
They hit like, oh yeah, they hit like a crowbar. Nowadays, I look back on that early period, and I lament my terrible attitude as a young fencer, and was super thankful that Michael and Will both had the wherewithal to understand that because we're all brand new to fencing, we should not be sparring at this moment. Now, you know, 10 years later, here Michael and I are with that experience, and I can facilitate people who have never fenced before sparring on their first day, because I'm there to watch them to make sure that they're not going to get hurt, they're not going to blow their knees, they're not going to hurt each other. And most of the time, when a new person shows up and they spar their first time, they spar me or Michael, just because, you know, we can trust ourselves not to allow any problems to happen, because that's usually someone on their first day. You don't know anything about them. Maybe they're a crazy person, maybe they're not, you don't know. And so it's better for you to be that punching bag for them, because you know that you're going to keep yourself safe, because that's what's super important about the whole situation.
No, so that safety is hugely important. So I guess next things next. We've talked a lot of longsword for a Rapier podcast. What brought you to,
yeah.
I mean, but back in the day, that's what HEMA was. HEMA was longsword, and everything else was kind of secondary. Or they'd look at you and go, say, do SCA, you dweeb. So yeah, what brought you to Rapier?
It's funny you mention that. The go do SCA dweeb thing is the reason that Rapier hasn't caught on in HEMA until kind of recently. And I've got my buddies like Sawyer and Levi and Woody to thank for that, because finally there's some like decent Rapier out there that people like. So like Josh Dale. What I love the most about Josh Dale is that Josh does such a great job of giving people what the general public believes saber looks like, and he's making it look like that, and it's working for him. You know, like everybody's like, oh, I love Saber. I love Pirates of the Caribbean. I love the Ridley Scott film, The Duelist. I think those films are awesome. And anybody who does, you know, sports saber, regular saber is like, oh, you know, saber can look like that, but it usually doesn't, right? And Josh has done such a good job of showing people that it can look that way. And in the same way, I think that what people think Rapier is supposed to be, guys like Sawyer and Levi have done such a good job of confirming that to people. Like, hey, Rapier and smallsword can be beautiful, and it and can be very quick, and can be very proficient, and can be very brutal, and it is not the dainty, lame, easy weapon that everybody thought it was pre-longsword, back when longsword was like the king of HEMA. And longsword is still the king of HEMA. Like, if you don't teach longsword at your school, then you almost have to close your doors. Like, it's kind of hard not to do longsword. There's only a few like places. There's only a few places that don't do longsword at all that do well. But it is rare. And I'm not saying I hate longsword or anything like that, but we definitely do longsword because it pays the bills. The majority of my students are longsword students, and that's just how it is. That's what people show up, and that's what they want to do. It's that old meme. It's like, I want to learn the longsword, and it's like, why? Why do you want to do? There's so many other things. Like, no, it's a hero's weapon. It's a knight's weapon. And it's like, I get it. I understand. I was you once upon a time, because I started with the longsword. I thought, you know, we're primarily an Italian school. Our primary source is Fiore di Liberi, and I was that guy. I was like, we're Fiore, we're extra deadly. We don't do our techniques because they'll hurt you, which is why I lose every single time, because I don't want to hurt you. I was that guy, man. When I was 18 years old, I was so annoying.
They kick your ass, and they kick you in the nuts.
That's right. Yeah, like, dude, if I could just break your arm, you wouldn't stand a chance.
They don't
no matter that you thrust me 6 times on the way in, but it's like,
I went through that Fiore phase too, where it's like, I am the street weapon, street lethal, bro. Oh god. But yeah, it's just kind of funny, because I'm a big MMA nerd, and you know how kind of MMA went through like the just bleed phase before it got to where it is now? HEMA's just coming out of the just bleed phase, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. But to the Rapier thing, you know, I bought one of the first ever Castile economy Rapiers back when the clamshell was perforated. It was open. The handles were wooden. They weren't 3D printed. The grip was wooden, and the blade was fine. I had one of those, and then I had somebody like bought a custom and then didn't pay for it, and so I bought the Castile economy and the custom, and the economy was fine, but the custom was like, no joke, 1,700 grams, because it was a Pappenheimer, like a Pappenheimer with the heavy blade and this giant scent stopper pommel, like a longsword size pommel on it. And I was like, "This is
pictures of that if we put this on YouTube, so I can just post
yeah.
images."
it was just such a giant sword, and we did like, I remember Michael and I did some stuff, and I was like, I am just so uninterested in this. I hate this. And you know, it took me taking a break and coming back, and Rapier was cool. It was fine, and I went to Purple Heart Open in 2021, so only a couple years ago now. It's been 4 years. And I competed in longsword. That's what I was there for. And then I was like, I'm bored. Why don't I just sign up for Rapier? Well, I had this new Malleus. Malleus had just released the Galante Cup Hilt Rapier. I still have the original grip for it. The blade and bell are long since destroyed. But I competed with that, and I didn't do all that good. I didn't do great. But while I was sitting down, this man named Ton Pui, who I didn't know who he was. I just like this European man. I didn't even know. Yeah. I didn't even know who he was. He was like, "Hey, would you like to do a few bouts?" And I was like, "Okay, sure, old man, whatever." And this dude just like kicked my butt for 3 minutes. Everybody's been beaten. Everybody's lost touches. And when I fought this man, I was going back and watching the video, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, not only do I not know how he hit me every time, but I don't even have the beginnings of an idea of what to do different, because you like lose a touch and you're like, oh man, had I just done this, like maybe this would have been different. Well, with Ton, I was like, I have no clue what's going on. I feel like Ton could kill me with this fake sword if he wanted to. If he wanted to kill me, he could with this fake sword. He could probably beat me up, and there'd be nothing I could do about it. And I had no idea who this man was. I go home, and I'm telling Michael and at our time, our Rapier instructor, Amanda Drabeck, about it. And they're like, you met Ton Pui? I was like, yeah, who is that? And then that was it. That was the beginning. And I start messaging I was already friends with the sword to sword instructor, Nathan. And I start messaging him, and he's like, you've got to fight Ton Pui? I was like, yeah, who is this person? And I start looking at videos, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh. And that was it. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was like anybody who's religious and has that moment of, I need to repent of my sins and like become a better person right now. That's how it felt in that moment. It's like, I need to become good at Rapier. I have to become good at Rapier. I suddenly don't care about anything else but Rapier. And that was it. That was the beginning. And ever since then, I have been 4 days a week try-harding at Rapier, because I must do it. It is my like Sisyphus boulder. I have to do it.
You and me both.
Man. I have to. Yeah.
I got the bug a little later than you, but like it's just this almost addictive, like there is a level to mastery with this particular tool that like I just don't feel is there for some of the other weapons, and it's just addictive every time you figure out a new technique or go, oh my god, that's a plate I studied. Which brings us to the next part, actually. What manuals do you work with? What sort of sources do you play around with?
Yeah, so if somebody were to come in and immediately ask the first question is, hey, what's your primary source for Rapier? Michael likes Gigante a lot. Gigante is very short. It's very, yeah, right, I know, everybody hates Gigante. But it's very short, it's very simple. But the reason he likes it isn't because it's like particularly better than any other manual. It's because it's very succinct. And Michael, took a lot of, people are going to hate this, Michael did a lot of epee lessons while I was gone and cross-trained and got those fundamentals of basic footwork and, how to lunge hand first and all these things down. And Gigante for me kind of clicked, and it was easy for me to take that and teach my students. Now, what I really like about Michael's style of teaching, and I teach the same way, is that I think all of my students could tell you that we are an Italian school. They could tell you probably who our primary sources were, but all of my students understand Gigante, Fabris, and Mercelli, and nowadays Senese, or back in the early days Senese, before anybody knew how to pronounce anything.
Capo Ferro.
Capo Ferro. But all of my students understand the Flower Battle as according to Charles and Michael. They understand Fabris Book 1 and 2 as according to Charles and Michael. Like, Charles and Michael did the legwork with the interpretations and reading other people's interpretations and watching the videos and going to the classes and going to the seminars, and then we teach our students the concepts from those manuals under our understanding of how they work. And so
Yeah.
when I'm teaching a class, I will say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, this, and this. Fabrice calls this placing them into obedience. And he refers to this particular action as proceeding in resolution. These things are not unique to Fabrice, but he chose to give them a name, so I'm going to tell you about it. Or Marcelli chooses to stand in this way with his dagger in this way or his sword in this way because he likes to do this particular thing, but also remember it's later period, his sword's a little bit lighter, so he chooses to make his engagements in this way. Or Sine's doesn't have quillins at all on his swords, so he chooses to make his blade engagements like this. And I reference those things constantly through my lesson. And I encourage the books are at the school. The students are free to take them home anytime that they want. But we're not like hardcore, like, all right, we're going to do Fabrice plates 1 through 3 today. And we're going to do these things. And then we're going to do sparring. The way we do our classes now is I do about an hour of lesson. And then I do an hour of sparring every single class. And the way my lessons work is that I have my students do so we get into a round robin thing. I fundamentally believe that group classes, after a certain amount of time of learning fundamentals, and by fundamentals I mean like basic footwork and hand positioning, I think that group classes kind of become a waste of time a little bit, or you start getting into diminishing returns where you're nothing's happening anymore. And so what I do is, let's say I've got 10 students, so I'll have 9 of them, or I'll have 8 of them free sparring, and it'll be like, let's say that 3 out of 10 effort, and it'll be limited target, like, hey, you're only allowed to thrust, you're only allowed to hit the face. Those are the only targets. And you're only allowed to thrust. And you're only allowed to thrust in 4th guard. No thrust in 2nd, no thrust in 3rd, no cuts. And so they do that, and then I have somebody on standby, and then I have somebody doing a private plastron drill with me for about 3 minutes, and then they cycle out and they round robin through that for a whole hour, and we take breaks every 15 minutes, and then we go into sparring. And everybody gets their own individual to their level plastron drill from me based on what that is. Some people get ultra complicated multi-disengage plastron drill. Some people get provoke and hit plastron drill, depending on how long they've been at it and what they're doing. And the purpose of the free sparring isn't the free sparring. It's the fact that they need to stay warm and stay active while they're waiting on their turn for a plastron drill. And then, of course, I offer private lessons for, longer time periods, and the plastron drills are a little bit more involved and more encompassing in what they can do. But that is my fundamental belief on how a class should be run. If someone does something different, I'm going to be like, you're wrong for doing it that way. But I do believe, I think that my method is very, very effective. I like it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen the footage you've posted. Your students are starting to really shape up and look really good, especially because how long has your club had like a dedicated rapier time now?
So we've had dedicated rapier time since I came back in 2021. It's always been Thursday night. I think it was Wednesday nights for a bit, and we switched to Thursday night. In East Texas, a lot of people go to church, so trying to compete with church on a Wednesday night is a kind of a waste of time. So we moved it to Thursday. And on Saturday mornings, we kind of do who's here. Is it mostly longsword students? Is it mostly rapier students? And depending on who shows up the most determines on what we do. And most times Saturday is just what we did Monday or what we did Thursday, like a repeat of said lesson, or just kind of just going back into what that lesson is. For the way this thing works is, and it kind of comes off as cope when I talk about it, is that I don't like teaching my students how to be good competition fencers as a primary lesson. And what I mean by that is, I will say, hey, look, the book says to hit them like this and hit them like this, but I find that in competition, those things are hard to see by the judges. So instead of hitting them in this target, why don't you hit them in this target? Because for a competition, it's they'll hear it, they'll see it, whatever it is. And so we're still doing the exact same action. So a great example, Meyer says that when you thrust and you push forward and they raise their hands too high, you do an untertwehr to the belly. And I like that move a lot, except that it assumes that you're striking someone to the belly and passing them up. And I don't think personally that it covers the afterblow as well as I would like it to. So instead of untertwering to the belly, I advocate that you untertwehr to the hands, and you stand in the bind and perhaps grapple after you hit the hands.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Just as an example, but that's a tournament specific advice. I still teach the Untertwehr to the belly. I still show them that this is what Meyer says to do. But for like, I was like, hey, but when we go to a competition, here's what I prefer doing based on my experience with judging and my experience with Afterblow. This is what I think that we should do instead. Where I take issue is when people only do the second thing, they only teach to the competition. And so what you get is you get a school who has a lot of early success in competitions, but then you go to a longsword tournament and you go fight. Everybody has a school in their mind where they can think of as like, man, I don't want to fight any of the guys from X school because they're all going to throw Geislins the whole time. It's going to be nothing but Geislins and one-handed thrusts. Why? Because those are effective. They're effective in tournaments, especially with a halt, with all the points being 1 point. Why wouldn't you do those things? And if your class and your school is based around the concept of competition, then why wouldn't you just have one-handed thrust Geislin class every single time? That would be the most advantageous thing for you to do. If your goal is making medals early on, then that's the way to do it. I find that style of fencing plateaus after a time period, and those people don't stick around, or they start getting surpassed by people that they used to beat pretty consistently, and they don't really know what to do anymore. So I think that the long route that I'm taking with my students, where I teach them the basic fundamentals and how to fence what in my opinion is correctly first, before I teach them all like dirty tournament tricks and stuff like that, I think that they will have a better foundation in the long run, to where that my students in 10 years will be superior to the competition school students in that same 10 years. Even if that competition school is able to like get the upper hand on my students within the first 2 or 3 years of that process, if that makes sense. And it's a hard sell. Sure. It's a hard sell to my students to, if they show up to a tournament and get beat up by some nonsense, and I have to be like, look, I understand, but like that's all that person's ever going to be able to do. And give it 1 or 2 more competitions, and you'll have that guy's number, and it'll be nothing to you. And that's all he'll ever do. And then he'll start losing. And watch. And like clockwork, that one guy who makes it to the semifinals match with some nonsense never comes back.
Yep.
Never makes it there again, because everybody figures it out.
At least from my experience, one of the most rewarding things you can have in HEMA is just that. It's developing mastery rather than learning a couple cheap tricks and winning off of those. Because cheap tricks, if that's all you've got, get old real quick. And if you actually take the long road and learn skills that make you a better martial artist and give you a more holistic approach to fencing, you'll have a longer career, and it'll probably be healthier for you too, because you're less likely to have weird form or do weird things that put your body in disadvantageous positions.
100%. And people ask, like, what is your goal with this school? And our goal is very simply to make students good at fencing. That's it. That's the only goal. Yeah. That is our only goal. Make students good at fencing. What does that mean? Well, what does it mean to them? What does it mean to us? That changes per person. And we talked about this at the beginning, kind of having a monopoly on the area. So Dallas is interesting in the sense that because it's so large, and they do have, I think, something like 9 schools now, that they're able to typecast themselves with a specific vibe. So everybody's very accepting of everything, like the within the community, both like socially and politically, I think, because everybody understands that when we're at fencing, and this is not our soapbox time. But there is like some schools are definitely dedicated to one particular part of HEMA than the other. Some are a lot more into the books, some are a lot more into the competition side. And if you like competing more than anything in the world, there's a school for you for that. If you like hanging out with your bros and talking about swords more than fencing, then there's a school for that. If you like the idea of like fencing identity in regards to we're Italian fencers or we're German fencers, there's a school for that, and that exists for you. But here in East Texas, because we're the only school, we have to be all of those things individually to each student. Because I have some students that love the idea of competition, and I have some students that this is just their cardio. I have a student who's a 77-year-old man, and he's honest with himself about how he'll probably never compete outside of the school. He competed in our in-house and kind of kicked butt for a bit.
That's awesome.
Because he was a Kendoka for many years, and this is his like active martial arts. He does his 100 push-ups, 100 squats, 100 sit-ups a day. His goal for fencing is cardio and like discipline, and so we have to be instructors for him that give him what he wants. And then if I have another student who's super interested in the history of Fiore di Liberi and the Condottiere, then I have to be like, hey, look, why don't we do half swording today? Why don't we do some dagger? Why don't we do some poleaxe or spear? And I have to be able to do that for them. And I have another student who's like, look, I'm going to compete next week, I need you to throw Geislins and one-handed thrusts at me like an insane person, then I have to be able to do that for them. And I'm happy to be all those things for all my students. Something Puck Curtis talked about, referencing Fiore's virtues, is he's like, fortitude is more than just the ability to stand and fight, more than just the ability to be stable in your fencing position. He said fortitude is as an instructor, is the ability to receive 10,000 touches for the betterment of the art. Like,
Yep.
as you stand there and get hit by your students and they get better over time, he's like, what an honor to be responsible for that many people getting better at fencing. And to me, I was like, absolutely, that is exactly what I want to feel about this. My students getting better is all I want.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, for me, that's the most beautiful part of this, especially once you kind of step into a more coachy, instructory role, is just being able to watch your students get better. Like, I know there's some instructors that don't want this, but like, as an instructor, your goal should be to have your students surpass you, right? Like,
absolutely. Well, see, the big red flag is when you see a school where like everyone, like the vibe is everyone's afraid of the instructor. Look at Blood and Iron. Everyone was terrified of Lee Smith. Lee Smith was God. Lee Smith was the biker gang leader. Lee Smith was the general. And if you got a touch on Lee, then you better believe it. That next touch is going to be his, whether it be a double or not, because he's coming. He's coming to get you. And that was the vibe. And some people kind of was like, it's like Cobra Kai, and it's like, no, it's just abuse. It's just abuse, guys. This is not. This isn't making you stronger. It's making you afraid, which is arguably worse. And God bless her, Brittany Reeves has talked a lot about. There was a point where she thought that the way that she was getting kind of beat up by him in single stick was cool, and realized, actually, I'm just getting beat up by a big dude. That's all that's happening right now.
Yep.
And thank God that she and Sean Franklin and others were able to escape that nightmare.
And the Blood and Iron diaspora has caused huge benefits for HEMA in the long run, but man, it sucked back then.
100%. And it's unfortunate that still, if you type in HEMA how-to, they're still one of the main videos that show up.
Yep.
And every so often I get students come in and are like, hey, I've been watching this. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but understand that's who these people are, And it's hard. One of the weird things as an instructor is you don't want to come off as only I know things. And so your student comes in and said, hey, I've been watching this channel called Blood and Iron. I'm like, please don't watch that. And it's not because I'm afraid that they're going to tell you something that I don't want you to know. It's more because like those people suck and I don't want you to give them any money.
No, that's
because you kind of get that Jedi Sith thing where it's like, you're holding me back, you're choosing not to teach me stuff to make me worse. It's like, no, it's not that at all. It's just like they're just terrible, and I need you to understand that. But what else you got for me, rapier wise?
So on the rapier end, I guess we kind of know how you got started. You got a really good luck roll, bumped into Ton, and then got obsessed, right?
Yeah, 100%.
What skill for you was kind of the most rewarding to work on? Like, what moment made it click that you had the potential to be good at rapier? Because let's be real, you're good at rapier. Like,
I do my best,
right?
Made
that click for you?
Rapier is a primarily thrusting weapon. Everybody, I think, is like, I think the hardest aspect of fencing is thrusting. Thrusting naked is easy, and by naked I mean in no opposition. When there's no sword in the way, it's easy to extend your sword and hit somebody. But when somebody is defending themselves actively and trying not to get thrust, it's hard to thrust somebody. And the ability to manipulate the relationship of the bind in order to thrust somebody when they're actively defending themselves and don't want to be thrusted, to me is the ultimate expression of rapier, of single rapier by itself, is being able to thrust somebody in opposition, in tempo, in either counter time or as a counter hit, or just like an in tempo thrust, while they don't want to be thrusted. That to me is the ultimate expression. Once I was able to do that, I wouldn't say at will, but like understood how it was supposed to work, is when I was like, okay, it's possible that I could be good at this. Now everybody does the same thing where they aren't good at something, so you compensate somewhere. I did this thing where I would do, anybody who's in the SCA heavy, especially, or in LARP, knows what a wrapping shot is, and it's
Yep.
where you send your sword off to one side and you fling that sucker around in a hard second, and you wrap them with the essentially the false edge tip. And I was sending those things out like crazy, and they were landing me a lot of hits, but I gave myself really bad tennis elbow doing it, because rapiers are heavy, and they are not meant to be flung around like a saber or a whip. So
For
I
sure.
had to like sit myself down and be like, look, Charles, it is more important that you get good at binding and thrusting in opposition than hitting your opponent. So you kind of have to eat a crow a little bit, and you have to sit there and just take it because you're fighting people. So the ego death part is, I'm the instructor. I am sort of better than most of my students because I am the instructor and I taught them. I am now I let's say that I fight student A and I beat him 10-3 consistently. Well, I do so with this goofy move, and then this goofy move, and then this goofy move. But here I am now, eating that crow and doing what I'm supposed to do. And maybe he doesn't win, or maybe it's even, or maybe he does win. Maybe he hits me a bunch of times and I eat it right in the face over and over and over again. And he goes, "Ha, I'm getting better than you. How does that make you feel, Instructor Charles?" And I have to be like, how do you say, "Oh, I'm working on something," and actually you're not better than me, without sounding like you're coping, without sounding like you're making excuses. So you just have to like undergo that ego death and be like, "Yeah, man, you're doing a great job. I'm really proud of you." And just
Yep.
like
I've learned
deal
that
with them
lesson the
kind of
hard
gloat,
way.
yeah, and you just have to deal with them gloating at you a little bit, because they want to, and in a way it's like positive for them to, like, they need to feel that victory, and it's an
Yeah.
important part of their growth as well. So I have to just be like, "Yeah, man, you're doing a great job. I really appreciate it." But that's you have to do that. You have to get worse at something. You have to
Before you
like
get better.
undergo that ego death and stop compensating in order to get better. And so when I began to obsess myself on the mechanics of bind work, and I began to like, reading through sources, looking at plates, looking at the subtle portion of plates, like, hey, how come in all of the plates, in all of these counter touches, the enemy or the opponent's sword is mere inches from their face? What does that mean? Is that on purpose? Is that artistic? Why did they do it this way? Answering those questions for myself, based on context clues, because they don't tell you exactly why in the text, but the text, based on the pictures, based on the experience, based on a little bit of frog DNA thrown in there, you begin to understand that, well, the reason that those thrusts are only inches away from his face is because he's demonstrating how subtle and how perfect his bind was. Because it's like, I don't need this ultra wide gain and bind to hit to be able to hit my opponent safely. I can do it just this much, and yeah, he only missed me by a quarter inch, but he did miss me. And so you begin to understand it. And that way, it's like, how little can I do and still do this correctly? And you limit yourself to that, and you just do that forever until you get better, basically. You
Yeah.
continue to
It's
limit yourself. You continue to take things away from yourself and get good at things until, I think it's James Riley says that, until you can do something at will, 70% of the time you're not good at it. And I
Yep.
understand that that's like kind of arbitrary, but it's a good framework. It's a good framework of, until I can gain and thrust and forth over and over and over again, the bread and butter of rapier, gain, thrust, and forth, hit in the shoulder. Until I can do that 70% of the time against an unwilling opponent, I am not good at gaining and thrusting and forth. And to me, even if that's like a made up number, I think that that's a good litmus test for myself, to decide whether or not I'm going to do it. And I really appreciated, because James, it's not that he's not a nice guy, but he's a very honest guy in regards to how he critiques your fencing. And not everybody's prepared to hear about how bad they really are.
I've
And
worked with
I
James
really,
too, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah, it's an
I
experience.
really appreciate, yeah. It's definitely like, oh man, I suck. It's like, whoops, I suck a lot more than I like, because fighting being a one-on-one sport is inherently at its core narcissistic. Whether you're a narcissist or not isn't what I'm saying here. It's the fact that you are attempting to beat another human being. You're attempting to be better than another human being at a very specific thing. And when you hit them, you feel in that moment for a second, I'm better than you. I'm better than you because I hit you and you didn't hit me. And it goes back and forth. And that breeds a certain form of like narcissism in regards to combat sports and fighting. And for James to be like, actually, you're not better. You're just lucky. over and over again. And you're like, oh my God, you're right. It's important to hear that. It's important to know
Yeah,
that.
for
And
sure.
when you know that about yourself, it becomes easier to self-diagnose without James there to tell you that you're just lucky every time.
No, that's a really big thing. I guess we've got about 15, 20 minutes left, so I'm going to drop one more
Well,
question on you, and then if you want to keep going, we can. If you want to call it here, we can. But what I'm going to ask is, if you could do one thing, change one thing about HEMA, if you had unlimited budget, time, and resources, how would you change the sport? What would you kind of bring into it, and where would you take it?
I don't know. The selfish answer is that I would tell everybody that musketeer triangular blades aren't the devil, but uh, I'm happy to fight that fight on an individual basis. Man, I really don't know. Jeez, I know I've never thought about that, and I think I stopped myself from thinking about it because I don't want to be like, what I would do? I would change this big thing. I mean, it would be cool to have like a federated rule set, or like a
Yeah,
standardized rule set, or like a standardized understanding of gear, because HEMA is very like anarchic in its nature, in the sense that we have major brands that
yeah.
make swords, but then someone shows up with something they made and like, hey, I'm a blacksmith, I made this small sword, and I'm like, oh, I don't really want you to use that. And how do
No,
you
we've all had
tell them
that
like,
moment.
yeah, it's like, or like, hey, I made all these leather things that are hanging off my jacket and they protect me, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, man. Like, I guess you can wear those things, but like they're not tested by anybody. They're not Newton rated, and you kind of know that leather is protective, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But I don't know if their rivets are going to hold, if their Chicago screws are going to hold. I don't know if they boiled it, or they heated it up, or they waxed it properly to hard. I don't know any of those things. I don't know. And so you're always kind of giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. And how long are we going to do that until someone gets hurt because of some
Yeah, that's
dumb thing that we allowed? Now, what makes this most recent incident interesting is that it was a big brand versus a big brand, and it didn't matter. They still got hurt.
yeah.
Big brand versus big brand at a big tournament, with a celebrity. I wouldn't call him a celebrity, but like a guy with his own HEMA club and like HEMA influencer channel, and he got hurt anyway. This thing that I'm worried about, like, hey, your homemade rapier stabbing into somebody's weirdo eBay Knights Gamison quilted Crusader jacket that you bought for $55,
Yep, we've all
with
seen that.
no armpits and buckles in the front. It's just, I'm worried about those things. That's like the extreme of no standardization. But I don't know. I think it would be
Yeah.
cool to have a standardized rules and a standardized gear, but I'm not willing to tell you what those things are,
Fair
if that
enough.
makes
No,
sense.
that makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. So I guess one more. You mentioned the word tempo, and especially with rapier
Yeah.
fencers, that is like just a word that everyone defines differently, even within the manuals we study. So how would
Oh,
you define
okay.
tempo?
I'll define tempo for you. Tempo is the distance. It is a measure of distance, not a measure of time. It is a measure of distance between one action and another. In music, tempo is defined by the distance between one note and another, not the time it takes, the distance that it takes,
Yep.
because music sound is measured in distance, not time. And so, in the same way, if I make a action, and then my opponent makes an action, and then I make an action and I hit my opponent, whatever the distance was, or rather the time it took for my sword to travel a certain distance. So this is where it becomes complicated, because it is time, it is distance. The distance that my sword traveled took a certain amount of time. That time and distance together are how long my opponent has to hit me back within a single tempo afterblow.
Yeah.
This tempo is not seconds. It is not seconds. Oh my God. You cannot take out a metronome and be like, this is what tempo is. It is not a defined term. Tempo is determined by the action that is happening in that moment. Tempo can change. Tempo changes all the time. Tempo changes in the middle of the action. Tempo accelerates and decelerates all the time. And so if two people are fencing really fast, and I mean really fast, lightning speed, that means that the afterblow window is as quick as the final touch. If two people are fencing like snails and they're moving in slow motion, then that means that the afterblow tempo is as quick as the final touch. It changes. So the afterblow changes per action, per person, per action, per bout.
Yeah. That.
And
I
that's
mean.
a
Yeah.
that's a hard sell, because people want seconds. They want seconds. Like, 1, 2. 2 tempo afterblow, 1, 2, 3, 3 tempo afterblow. Nonsense. That's not tempo. That's
Yeah.
time. That's just time.
And I think that's
And
one of the
it
things
frustrates me a
people
lot.
lose
It
track
frustrates
of.
me a
Yep,
lot.
for sure. Like, I've been to a bajillion different HEMA tournaments, and everyone defines their afterblow window as like, we have a one tempo afterblow. Well, what do you mean by one
Well,
tempo?
yeah.
Recount to
Well,
what?
yeah, they mean 1 second. They mean 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 1 Mississippi. That's what they mean.
Yep.
And that's whatever. It's the same thing as, so the use of tempo incorrectly here is the same thing where people are like, oh dude, did you see that? Did you see that bout over there? They went up to 9 intentions, and I'm like, I promise you they didn't. Like, I bet you they went to 9 first intentions over and over again, and they had a 9 sequence parry riposte sequence until someone got hit. But what that really was 9 failed first intentions over and over again until someone got hit. I promise you, they did not go into 9 intentions. Intentions are not actions; they are intentions. When did you intend to hit that person? Well, I intended to hit him every time I swung my sword. Okay, so that's first intention every time, is what that means.
Yeah, I think that's
You see those really sick saber parry riposte sequences, and they go on for like 15 counts. I'm like, well, that was 15 first intentions over and over again.
Yep.
15 failures over and over again. And I know that the hang and bang looks cool, but that's bad. It's bad fencing. It's bad fencing. It's to be annoying about it, it's common fencing is what that is. And that's not what I'm interested in.
It's common fencing. I might just single out that audio clip and make it your text tone when you message me on Facebook when we both want to scream at each other about
It would be
something
funny.
fencing oriented.
One final point. What separates common fencing from masterful fencing is using the sword as the sword was intended to be used. And what I mean by that, every weapon, every melee weapon that exists mostly in 2 tempo. I have a warhammer. Somebody swings at me. I parry the swing and then I riposte. I have a sword and a shield. I parry the swing and I riposte. Or I do hit in single tempo, but because I have a shield, I have an axe. I parry and then I hit. I have a spear. I parry, then I hit. Poleaxe, parry, then hit. What makes a sword is the ability to parry and hit simultaneously in tempo. At the same time. The ability to hit and defend at the same time is what makes a sword. Common fencing is parry riposte. Masterful fencing is hitting in single time. Hitting in single time. Now, I understand that Lichtenauer defines masterful fencing a little bit more specific than that, but my understanding of, Mercelli and Fabrice both say that the best hit is a hit in single time, a counter touch in single time, a stop hit in single time. I teach you these other things because stuff happens. But the best hits are using the sword as the sword was designed, which is defending yourself and striking your opponent at the exact same time. And only a sword can do that. And that's what makes fencing, and specifically Rapier, so special to me, is that Rapier, to me, is the ultimate expression of that, because a Rapier is primarily a thrusting weapon. And thrusting and defending at the same time, to me, is the ultimate expression of what a sword is for and designed for. And that's why I love Rapier so much.
That's really awesome, and I think that's a great note to end on. Yeah, is there anywhere where people can hit you up for social media, anything like that, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me, Charles D. Turner, on Facebook. I'm the admin of the worst HEMA page ever, Try Hard HEMA. God save us all. God forgive me.
God forgive you for your sins.
You can find us on HEMA Club Finder. You can find East Texas Historical Fencing just by Googling us. If you do Google us and find us, if you email us, you'll email Michael. You can find me, like I said, on Facebook, the whole thing. We're all over the place. We're not hard to find. If you want to message me on Facebook and talk about fencing, I'll send you 75 voice messages, all 7 or 8 minutes long a piece. So be aware. But I'm happy to talk to you about it.